questions or things you want to point out, put it on there and we will take care of it. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and let's get started with Michael Wesch. You want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Mike Wesch. I'm a balding white guy sitting on a beach here with a, looks like a gamer microphone set on. I'm actually not on a beach. This is just a Zoom virtual background. It's kind of a fun thing you can do with your students. You can do any background you want. I picked this for the calming nature of it, I guess. I'm actually sitting in a dungeon of sorts in our basement. I have 3 kids running around upstairs. And I'm sitting here with the kitty litter. So, so I didn't want to share the kitty litter with you guys. I'm super passionate about sharing anthropology and the insights and the method with as many people as possible. And several years ago discovered the joy of online teaching and reaching out to people who don't have access to campuses. And so that was my entry into it. And I've been doing it now for several years. And I just wanted to share some of my knowledge and insights with everybody as we go through this transition.
Hi, I'm Angela Jenks. I am an associate professor of teaching at the University of California, Irvine. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm a light-skinned Black woman sitting with dark curly hair, sitting in front of a beige wall and background, which is the one place in my house that does not have kid toys and art on it right now. So you might also, if you're listening in, hear my kids playing in the background. I started online teaching several years ago now. So I've used, I think, 6 different platforms at this point in various jobs at different institutions, have focused on trying to learn a lot about it. And I moved back and forth between in-class and online teaching. And I am the editor of the Teaching and Learning Anthropology Journal. So I've also learned a lot from the other people who I've worked with in that project.
Hi everyone, I'm Nell. I'm a white woman with short black hair wearing glasses, and I'm in my living room right now. I'm the Accessibility and Meetings Coordinator for the American Anthropological Association, and I have a lot of experience creating accessible classrooms and identifying what accessible practices to incorporate into online teaching, which is going to be particularly important as access needs shift from doing face-to-face interactions to online spaces. You may have noticed that all of the presenters on the Zoom right now provided visual descriptions where we identified what we look like, where we are, and these audio descriptions are a way to ensure heightened accessibility, and so that way there's audio information without relying on visuals. Another point about accessibility is that this webinar is not closed captioned, but we will be providing a recording following this, and that will be closed captioned for anyone who needs access to those captions following the event. At this point, though, I will turn it back to Mike.
All right, thank you. And I just want to mention also that even if you don't have students who have disabilities in your classes, a lot of your students are going to be doing dishes or watching the kids or something like that, and providing these audio descriptions is really useful. So we're really going to emphasize a lot of this sort of multi-modality, doing doing things sort of in multiple mediums throughout your course. So we wanted to start though, not just with technology and tools and tips, but really with a big picture thing. And that is, using this as a moment to reflect on our core goals and values as teachers. And so we wanted to bring up this idea of backwards teaching, which we're going to start essentially with the why, not what or how. We often start teaching by thinking about what we want to teach. We're really excited about particular material, or we might be excited about a particular method or a particular tool or technology. But really, what really matters is a why. And I'll just tell you my why, and maybe you can come up with one for yourself as well. The why that I keep in my head as I create my class is that I want to create voracious self-learners who lean into difference. And if the thing that I'm doing isn't helping to create voracious self-learners who lean into difference, then I scrap it. So then I can move to the how. And for me, if I want to create voracious self-learners who lean into difference, well then the how are things like, I want to show them great free materials that they can find on their own, like podcasts, documentaries, great books, and so on. I want to help them find a rhythm and a way that they can work this into their busy life. And one way to do that is by showing them these great audio resources that they can use while they're going about their busy life. I like to create challenges rather than assignments. And I think of these as things that actually get them out and practicing these things in their daily life. And ultimately, I also want to build a passionate learning community where the passion for learning spreads. So ultimately, then you get down to the what, like what actually appears on the site, what is the material of the site. It ends up, being some things that maybe traditionally you don't think of as being in a classroom, but they're things like podcasts, many of them popular podcasts, passionate readings. These are me like actually reading the material to them and with them, and also trying to nurture great conversations. So that's where I'm starting from, and I think a lot of what you'll see in what follows will come from that. And Angela had some thoughts on this as well.
Yeah, I think that's really important to start with what you want students to think about, what you want students to remember about your class 10 years from now. What do you want them to be doing? And I think that's really an excellent practice for all teaching. I think we have to think about too, though, in this present moment, that we can't really expect everything to continue with business as usual. It's not going to be business as usual. And so also reframing our goals in backward course design. So we might have the learning goals, we might have the goals of what you want students to remember, to be able to do. But in this moment also, we have to think about about broader student needs. So I have been reframing some of my classes, and I teach on the quarter system. So instead of switching a class right now, we're actually in final exams, and we're getting ready to start new classes, brand new classes that are going to be running remotely. And really thinking about the role that class might play in giving stability to students. That I can't expect them maybe to do everything that I normally would expect, exactly the same outcomes in a face-to-face class during the regular quarter, but maybe I can provide some familiarity, some routine, some social contact while we're all isolated, to think about all these other needs too as really important outcomes, and then how we build the class around trying to meet those needs.
Yeah. Yeah, so we're just gonna, if you're following along in the document, which is at bit.ly/AAA tips, you see our first tip is to build community, and we have several ways to do that. One way is to actually just kind of do a welcome video. Now, traditionally, I would do a welcome video that's sort of like 3 things about me, and then I just invite students to do it as well. These are really like low stress things. I invite them just to take out their phone and do this. This doesn't have to be like a really big production by any means. And this has worked really well. But I think if you're transitioning midstream, you probably already know a lot about your students, and they probably already know a lot about you. So instead, I would suggest maybe just showing them your space. So I made a quick video sort of showing them my basement space here with the cats and the kitty litter and the old toys and all that. And it just sort of humanizes the space. And then, of course, I invite them to do the same. And this is sort of our opening trial discussion, you might say. And it brings a lot of warmth to the class. It brings a lot of sense of like, we're in this together. So I'd really recommend doing that. If you've never been on camera, if you struggle to be on camera, which I do, this is also a great way to just kind of break the ice and help you realize that this isn't about performing, it's about connecting. And that just takes all the edge off for me. I used to have so much stress about teaching online because I thought I had to perform. I thought I had to do a TED talk every time, and just be amazing. It helps so much to realize that this is really just about connecting and not performing. And then this really helps you be present in your class. So, it's hard to build presence in an online situation, but video is a huge help for doing that. So there are some AQ sources that I've linked to on the bit.ly document if you'd like to look at those, and one of them is for creating a welcome video.
I think I've done that with still images too. So using the discussion forums, for example, posting sometimes video introductions, but sometimes a still image and asking students to post any image of anything that is important to them. And so lots of people post their pets, especially, or pictures of favorite foods that they have. So it humanizes everybody, and it gives them something to talk about, to connect with too.
And it's a lower barrier of entry if you just do a picture, right? So that's good, yeah.
Yeah, so just expanding on that, there was actually a question in the chat regarding ADA issues if videos aren't captioned, which is correct. And so it's important to make sure that whatever videos are being created include captions. And there are a ton of options to provide automated captioning. Actually, somebody shared on the chat that there's Panopto, WebEx, Zoom, YouTube. Just uploading your video to any of these options where there can be automated captioning, specifically YouTube, and then changing that captioning and ensuring its accuracy. So it's not saying anthropology is M through logic or some odd words like that. Ensure that they're accessible. Additionally, as we've been modeling, again, make sure that the videos include in the moment audio descriptions, much as we were providing. Or provide an additional text regarding that information as a visual description written down. If you have the time and want to, you can make an additional audio track, but just providing those visual descriptions to make a video completely audio will make it more accessible to not just blind and low vision students, but to anyone who is switching over to audio learning.
And also, if I could, if I could just quickly, for those who came in late to this webinar, again, I want to point to, if you scroll to the bottom of your screen, you'll see a number of icons, and you'll see a chat icon, and that's how you can follow along, ask questions as well. Thanks.
I was going to highlight a couple other ways to really create community in your class. And one is to really break up students into smaller groups. So I'm currently, I'm preparing for a class that's 250 students that's moving online. And so I'm not expecting students to be communicating in any way with all 249 other people in the class. But using small groups of about 6 to 8 people is really what's recommended, so that if they're doing discussions in a discussion forum, you have those 6 to 8 people. You can set Zoom meetings so that you preset who the students are in various breakout rooms. You can make those the same 6 to 8 students who are in a discussion discussion group within Canvas or whatever course management system that you're using. So it means throughout the class they only are really communicating with a small group of other students. They get to know those students throughout the class. It also creates, especially at this time, a kind of buddy system where you have somebody else who you can call on, who you can ask questions about, who you know very well. One of the other things, especially right now, that can be helpful is to create an informal communication option for students. So this might be a separate, ungraded, or even an extra credit discussion forum where students can just check in. It doesn't have to be questions about the class. It doesn't have to be about assignments. They can just check in about how are they doing, how are they managing life, what kinds of resources do they need. This can be something where you as the instructor are also checking in. So showing or even discussing these are conditions under which I am trying to work. Here are resources that I've learned about that might help you as well. It can be an informal space for conversation. You can see on the screen there a recommendation for some text that you could use to do that.
Yeah, and so now we're going to move on to, again, if you're following on the Google Doc, we're now to the next big bullet point, which is creating a simple online course structure with a weekly rhythm. We thought this was super important, so we did elevate that right up close to the top, right under community. And so one of our first recommendations is to use the modules function. This is something I resisted early on, maybe other people have resisted it, but one of the best things about it is that it maximizes all the accessibility features that are built into your LMS. It ensures a clean look across platforms, so it looks great on mobile. It allows you to organize all your materials really nicely. You can actually see, if you're following on a Google Doc, Angela's posted her example there, and you can see my example on the screen. They look almost the same. And it's this, there is this sort of consistency that gets created that students get familiar with, and they might actually see it in their other classes because they might be familiar with the modules from other classes. It also creates a clear to-do list. That's especially true in Canvas, which is very nice. And it also limits student access to information behind the scenes, like things that you don't want them to accidentally see, stuff from last year or something that you're teaching. Like once you put in a module, it's clean and it's there, and they know what to do. I love also how, you know, when you click on things, you get this nice next button. Those little things are really, really valuable. Another thing that I do is I try to, you can see here how it works really well on mobile. I found that a lot of my students are accessing the material through mobile. So it's nice that it's a clean interface between the two. And then the other thing is you can see how consistent they are. And I always just have like 4 things. There's the materials, there's the quiz, there's the discussions, and there's an activity. And there's only 3 things due every week. It's the same 3 things due every week. And that kind of consistency creates this sort of weekly rhythm that I think can be really useful. Once you have that rhythm, and you can see here there's an AQ sheet for establishing that rhythm, which includes not only the student rhythm, but also your rhythm, which is so useful for your own well-being. Boy, online classes can just seem totally chaotic when you first start. A lot of people start to realize that it's actually much more work than teaching in class, but it doesn't have to be if you can create this rhythm and have a really clear set of expectations for yourself and for your students. So along with that, we also would recommend making an orientation video where you just walk people through the class. Again, this doesn't have to be like high production quality. It can just be you navigating the class, and if you want, you might use a screen recorder like Screencast-O-Matic. I just point to this one because it's free and it launches online. It's very easy to use. And just record yourself going through the class and showing the students what it looks like and what they can expect week to week. I think.
Yeah, that. Oh,
yeah,
sorry to
go
interrupt.
ahead. I was actually just
that
going to
intro
invite you.
video can be a really important part of really teaching students how to take an online class. It's important to remember that right now, the students who you have did not sign up to take online classes. Many of them have never done that before. They don't know what to expect. They don't know how it's going to run, much like many of the faculty who are starting them. We're not really sure exactly what this online class will look like. So making expectations really clear and explicit for students, letting them know the kinds of hardware and software that you're hoping they have. We'll talk a little bit about checking in to see if they do in fact have that, but letting them know what they might need, how much time they should be expecting to spend on the class, where they can find the materials, what they should do if they're having trouble, being very clear and explicit about all of those expectations, and really giving them advice to help them figure out, how do I figure out my schedule when everything is so chaotic right now? When should I be anticipating that things will be posted? When should I be anticipating that I can turn them in? Helping make that rhythm really clear to them.
Yeah, and I wonder if at some point maybe we should maybe get explicit about what we think of as a good rhythm and how much we expect from our students in this coronavirus moment. You know, I think personally my expectations are reduced, you know, because I think they're going to have a lot to deal with. So I don't know if we could all sort of share our number that we have in mind. For me, and push back on me if you think this is not a good number, but I'm sort of thinking about 6 hours a week on my class, which is quite a bit less than I normally ask for. But I'm hoping that for students who are really inspired by it, of course, that'll blow up and inflate to many more hours. You know, I hope that some will become passionate and it'll be 10 or more hours. But boy, just from what I'm hearing from students, 6 is my number right now. I'm willing to, you know, be pushed back on this. I'd love to hear what other people think about that. Yeah, so so now moving on to the next. We also thought at the end of week 1, since this is also new to everybody, your students and yourself, give yourself a space to revise at the end of week 1. So I'd recommend having a discussion at the end of week 1 and then respond to students and their feedback on how it's going. And that might be a point where, you know, maybe you decide instead you want to do 9 hours a week. You want to sort of, you're framing in your head that you're going to give them about 9 hours a week. Maybe you'll get some pushback and say, like, I just can't do that in this moment, and you can make adjustments. Maybe your discussions aren't working out the way you thought. That's a common complaint with online teaching. It's quite difficult to get a vibrant discussion going. But you can just work with the students, and by showing them that you're working with them, I think that'll help out a lot. So this is just an example on the screen.
Check-ins and feedback are often recommended, but I think it's an important point that we don't want to wait until partway through the class or halfway through the class for those of us who are starting new classes to really do that check-in, but doing it right away to see how things are going is really important.
Yeah. Yeah. So definitely do one right at the end of the first week and be willing to adjust. All right. The next one is about building materials easily. And this is so important right now because one of my big concerns for all of you is that you're going to be killing yourself trying to create awesome materials. And it's so hard to create. Even a 10-minute high quality video could easily take up your whole week. As somebody who produces these things, I can tell you it's not easy and it takes a lot of time. So I would definitely recommend looking for stuff that's already out there, looking for great materials that are already out there. And so we've gathered a few that you can see in the Google Doc. This is really just the beginning. There's a lot of people creating lists like this right now on Facebook groups and things like that. We'll add some links to those as well. I'll mention a few here. I've co-created this with Ryan Klataski, this anth101.com. And you can see if you're doing like an intro class, there's these sort of familiar categories. And if you click on one of these, it'll take you to basically a little mini lecture that we've done. These are actually sort of out in the world lectures. Like this is when I went to Vietnam to find out who made my suit. But then we also provide other, popular documentaries, just different things that might relate to the material. And this could actually essentially replace lectures in a situation like this. So that's worth considering. We have several resources like that. You can just look at any of them. Like if you do language, you could look at what we have for language. We have a podcast here from Radiolab, things like that. There's also just look for TED videos, like Anthropology. TED brings up hundreds of videos. There's great podcasts. Angela actually did a great podcast about podcasts and how she's used
My
them.
students love podcasts, I will say.
Yeah.
Every time I use one, they talk about how much they want more podcasts.
Yeah.
That's one of their favorite mediums to listen to information on. And you don't have to make a brand new one yourself.
Yeah, they're so good. And I hear the same thing from my students. And again, a lot of these students are busy. They have to do more than one thing at once. And having something they can listen to is really useful. There's so many popular ones out there. It doesn't have to be just one that starts with anthro. It doesn't have to be anthropod. It doesn't have to be this anthro life. There's a lot of popular ones out there like Invisibilia. Angela discusses a bunch in the cultural anthropology discussion. So this is Invisibilia. You can see some of the titles here are obviously relevant to some of your classes. So those are kind of the big ones. We'll try to provide some more resources there as well. And maybe we should crowdsource some of those as well. I think there's probably maybe if in the chat, if people have things they think we should add, please put them there. Another thing that I do, and this is I think actually a quick and easy way to essentially create a lecture for the week, or if you want to replace a lecture, is actually just to read to the students. So take the reading for the week and you just read to them. And my students just absolutely love this. Again, they can just plug it in while they're doing other things. And I think one of the nice things is they sort of hear my passion for the material. I can add commentary. I can teach them how I read the material. Those are all, I think, useful things. So, Angela, do you want?
Yeah, I think also offering multiple forms of engagement. So thinking about, can you offer, yes, written work, but also audio work, also maybe some videos that students watch. For assigned reading, thinking beyond just journal articles and books, especially for those of you who are switching modalities right now in the middle of the semester. Keep in mind that students may have left their book somewhere that they can't get back to. They may not have access to some of the materials they had at the beginning of the class. Oftentimes things like blog posts and op-eds and fictional work or news articles. These are all places where you might be able to get at some of the issues that you're trying to discuss in the class in a way that's a little easier for students to digest. One of the other things that I've done for readings is to use collective annotation platforms. So Perusal is the one that I've used most recently. This is a free e-reader where you can create an account for a class, and all of the students can then register for it, and you can upload PDFs. And you can comment on the PDF. So I put articles in there, and then I add my own commentary, really walking students through the article, especially for students who haven't taken anthropology before, who aren't familiar with how to do reading in anthropology. I can point out, like, pay attention to this, or remember this concept, or what do you think this means? Can you think of an example of this? And then I require students to include so many comments of their own throughout each article. Students have had great feedback on this. I've used it in some smaller classes, but I just this last quarter used it in a 250-person class again, breaking students up into small groups so they only saw the comments of a small number of other students. But it worked really well to help them engage with the readings and to really teach them how to do the readings instead of requiring a quiz at the end.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've had a lot of luck with stuff like that as well. It's any sort of engaged reading, I think, is very powerful. So the next sort of section we have is just basically how to start each week, and we've recommended 3 things, both for accessibility and for engagement and organization, simplicity, and so on. One is just a printable overview. So this is just an example from one of my classes, Introduction to the World's Religions, where I've just taken like the 12 big ideas or big questions for the week and put them into a single document. This is a great way to organize the class and organize your own thoughts as well. There's actually a module roadmap that AQ provides that sort of provides little questions. They have a little template here that you can kind of think about, you know, what are your core outcomes? What kind of assignments do you have for the week? And make sure they all connect. And then you can provide that for students. So the first thing we suggest is the printable overview. The second thing is in an email that is really clear. It shows like what to do and what you're covering that week and why it matters. And then the last thing is we recommend doing like a meeting, which you can just record, and that can be like your opening video for the week. And so this is actually what my class looks like when all this is done. You got the outline that you can print here. You've got the reading that I've done here that you can click on to listen to. And then this is like essentially a Zoom meeting, and you can see I'm holding the sheet there and talking to them about it. And then students can ask me questions, and that basically provides a 13-minute overview for the week. It's a tiny little mini lecture of sorts that almost produces itself, you know, because it's just a recording of a class meeting. Let's see, I think those are, yeah, that's the main thing for how to start the week. And then Nell is gonna take over for a bit here and talk about some accessibility.
Yeah, absolutely. Can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Just building off of what Michael was saying regarding the one clear email, in those emails, identify the important things by bold. So there's a very clear visual cue. It's modeled in the document as well, so students can see what exactly needs to be done. And the recorded online meeting being live is really crucial for a lot of students with executive functioning difficulties, because a lot of people in that community, of the disability community, are majorly stressing about the lack of accountability with online classes. So having a one-point check-in meeting on Zoom that is a consistent meeting that is requiring people to go to is going to be crucial to support students who really did not sign up for online classes for a lot of different reasons. So continuing on in the accessibility and providing and developing a class using universal design for learning, make sure that you provide materials in multiple formats. And we've been talking about this, whether it's providing a written version, a video, audio. Make sure that whatever is critical has multiple formats where possible. Don't provide information only in one format that you need students to understand. We have listed a few great resources. The first resources is created by Dr. Amy Hamrai, and it's Accessible Teaching in the Time of COVID-19. And so this resource really outlines a ton of suggestions by the disability community specifically about how exactly to create an accessible online course. The resource outlines what to do if you're doing lecture, what to do if you're doing discussion, what to consider. And so take the time to really go through that and build accessibility into your transition onto an online class. That will ensure that the majority of your students are able to access it without having to come forward and say they have a new access need. A second great tool is 20 Tips for Teaching an Accessible Online Class by Cheryl Bergstaller. And so this is a resource that just outlines 20 really quick tips that should be consistently at the top of your mind, and where possible, making sure that you're incorporating them into your classroom design. A lot of it is simply good pedagogy to ensure that an online course is available to as many students as possible. And then the next resource is just remembering to move beyond boilerplate accessibility accommodations. Accessibility is much broader than ADA accommodations. It is about the very design of creating a course for everyone. And if you're able to create multiple formats of materials, you'll be okay. And there's a great comment here about how a lot of accessibility supports international students as well. The primary basic accessible teaching strategies to keep in mind for online materials are outlined by the article by Amy Hamrai, which include image descriptions and alt text for all images and videos. Any kind of images you're showing that you want students to learn from need to include an image description. Again, it's the issue of there may be students who won't have that visual because they won't have access to a video or to an internet connection that provides good downloadable rates. Videos need to ensure that they have visual descriptions and audio descriptions, as we've been describing throughout the video.
Reunida por la mañana y después salió un momento con mi vecina para Walgreens.
Okay, for some reason, we have someone else coming in. If we could remind everyone to mute yourselves. Again, if you scroll to the bottom of your screen, you'll see, put your cursor to the bottom of the screen, you'll see a number of icons. All the way to the left, you'll see mute. So mute yourselves. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. Videos need to include captions, or if captions aren't available to be incorporated into the video, try to identify a transcript and provide that alongside with the video. PDFs with OCR or optical character recognition for screen reader access. Some of your students may be switching from reading written out copies or printed copies to PDFs, and they might be using a screen reader to read automatically what's on the document. And again, there's a really great tool to help check for screen reader accessibility called WebAIM, and that's on our document, and we'll make sure to link that.
Yeah, I wanted to add one thing. It kind of goes along with everything we've been talking about, and that is another accessibility issue is just students not having online access. Maybe they only have high-speed internet once a week or something like that. So if you could create one download for those students who only have, one shot a week to get this done, do that. And one way I do that is I create a single downloadable MP3, and I make sure all of my materials have an audio version. So that's why, one of the reasons why I read to them is that creates an audio version of that. And then I know that my students can download this one 3-hour MP3. It also holds me accountable. If I've told them there's going to be 3 hours of material for the week, I know that when I build that MP3, if it's, turns out to be 6 hours, I overshot. So I really like to create one master MP3 that they can download, and then they can just listen throughout the week when they have time.
I think one of the other important things to think about is to ask students actually what they need. So we're doing a lot of kind of thinking about what students might need, but really communicating with them directly to figure out what they need. You'll see in the Google Doc, there's a link to a sample survey that can be used to do this, can be adapted to gather information from students. So to really ask them, do you have access to high-speed internet? Do you have access to a computer? Will you be able to watch videos? Will you be able to join a Zoom call like this, a synchronous Zoom call, which I'm guessing it will be hard in large classes to get everybody able to do something at the same time. And so you can adapt really around some of the needs that students have. I think it's also really important to keep in mind right now that those needs are going to change. And they may change very fast if people are getting sick, if they are caregiving, if people are losing jobs. I mean, there's a lot of instability right now that we can't count on things being the same. I mean, they're different than they were 1 week ago. We can't count on them being the same a couple weeks from now as they are now. So having frequent communication with students is important too. I've started asking students some of these questions and about what they want as we move remotely and what faculty can do to best support them. And the two biggest things they've said are flexibility and communication are the two things that they're going to need going forward. But really using a survey like this to ask your own students is also very helpful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that hits on
yeah.
some of the other things that you mentioned in the document that are linked in the Google Doc, like this, document on how to support students during COVID-19, which has a lot of useful recommendations, and then the building flexibility into the course right at the up front, right? So you want to mention a few of your thoughts here? Yeah.
Sure. So that resource that's up on the screen right now is especially focused on basic needs. So remembering that students have needs within the class, accessibility to documents, to videos, but also a lot of our students always, but even more intensely right now, are facing basic needs concerns. So not having enough access to reliable food, to housing, to healthcare, certainly. And so this document is focused on things that institutions and universities can do to try to help connect their students to those resources as well. Mm-hmm. Building flexibility, I think, into the course from the very beginning is important both for students so that they have this flexibility. It's important for accessibility, but it's also really helpful for instructors and faculty so that you don't have to individually respond to every single incident that comes up, or especially for those of us who are teaching hundreds of students at a time, we should not be the arbiters of what's an important emergency or what other people's priorities are. And recognizing that students have other priorities and they need to be able to work around those. So there's a couple of ways that I have done this. One is if I have multiple assignments of the same type, like students are doing a weekly journal assignment, or there are several quizzes. I build it so that students can drop the lowest grades. So if, say, we have 10 discussion sections over a 10-week quarter, students have to go to 6 of them. They have to participate in 6 of them. They can choose which 6. If they miss a couple, they don't need any sort of documentation. They don't need to let us know. They can just automatically miss a couple. Same thing for things like quizzes and exams. If you have 3 quizzes, students can drop one of those quizzes. And this both provides flexibility for students, but it also encourages progressive learning too. So if students do less well on the first exam, they can drop that grade and do better on later ones, or they can miss one without any need to discuss makeups or anything else. Flexible deadlines are also really important right now. So trying to have a single routine deadline, one deadline every week in many of my classes, when I've taught online, I make everything due, say, like midnight on Sunday. And so students always know that they're always going to have that deadline. But a lot of flexibility is really important right now. If you can provide grace periods, for example, so here's the deadline that you'd like students to aim for, but there's no late penalties for 2 days after that, or whatever makes sense for the particular assignment and the needs for, obviously we have grade reporting deadlines as well, but whatever you can to provide no questions asked grace periods. I've provided late passes to students that I call just a stuff happens pass, that all you have to do is turn this in late and say, I'm using my stuff happens pass, because stuff happens to all of us. I think doing as much of that as possible right now will really help to support students. And then the last thing is do not require doctor's notes. Even in the best of situations, doctor's notes assume that students have access to healthcare. It assumes that they have the money, even if they have health insurance, that they have the money to pay copays. So to think about how much does a doctor's note cost, even with my excellent university insurance that I'm lucky to have, it costs me $20 every time I get a doctor's note. That kind of demand, especially in this time when a lot of people are going to be sick, a lot of your students, even if they themselves are not, they may be taking care of other people who are sick. It's an enormous burden to require that kind of documentation. I think it's really important to just trust students that they know what they need, and to do whatever we can to build into the course a way to accommodate those needs.
Mm-hmm. And I think this also is going to relate to self-care, which we're going to get to at the end, but if you have really complicated demands on your students for verifying these things, you're going to spend way too much time wrestling with students who have missed a deadline. So building these things in a very like fair and transparent way that's open to everyone, I think is really important. And like you teach 250 people, you know, so these types of things I think work for that, right?
Yeah.
So,
and there's people in my department who teach up to almost 500. So
yeah,
there's a level of scale that increases quite a bit there.
Yeah. So the next thing we want to talk about are assignments, and we're really not going to spend a lot of time on this time because it deserves its own sort of section. So we're going to do more of that next week. That'll also give us some time to brainstorm and hear your ideas. So if you look at the Google Doc, we actually have a invitation to share your own like assignment ideas, and I'll go ahead and put that in the chat as well. So if you want to click on that, you'll see it's a blank document at this point, but we'd love it if you'd be willing to share a few of the things that you're planning on doing. You know, just a few things that came to mind for me is sort of, I'm just sort of thinking philosophically, like where I'm framing myself, I go back to my why. You know, my why is, you know, how do I create voracious self-learners who are open to difference? And so I could imagine, for example, adapting Challenge 8 from Anth 101, which normally is just to connect with someone from a foreign country or to find somebody who's actually helped create something that you own from a foreign country. And we've had great success with this. But I think now in this moment, it would be a great time for students to reach out to other people throughout the world through social media and see how other places are dealing with the COVID-19 moment and what it looks like from their perspective. I think that could be a really powerful assignment. Another one would be just to have students do like mini ethnographies of CV-19 related issues around them. How are people thinking about CV-19 around them? You know, I imagine even on this discussion, we're in different parts of the United States, and I'm sure that the sort of political take and cultural take on just how dangerous this is right now would vary quite a bit around the nation. And those types of things can be really interesting. So one thing to think about is that when you move online, you don't have to think of it as, say, you know, it's like out of the classroom and therefore worse. There are some interesting advantages and opportunities that open up as well. And I like to think of an online class as more of an out in the world class, and think about how students who are out there in different places could contribute to a discussion or even like a group research project by doing these mini ethnographies, and then aggregate those in a group discussion to think about broader patterns of what you're seeing. So those are some of the directions I'll be going as I think about things for next week. But I'd love to hear your ideas as well. And Angela, you had some neat ideas here as well.
Yeah, so this is something we'll be talking about more next week. I'm a medical anthropologist, and so I'm teaching a class, for example, next quarter on health inequity that I'm currently reframing to really focus on COVID-19, because it's a moment where all of the things that we're talking about in the class and all of the structural inequalities we look at are immediately apparent. That class is also, though, I focused it the last couple of times I've taught it on really trying to help students think through what we can do about some of the inequities. And so that's also part of how, when I'm thinking about what might students need, not just to learn in the current moment, but to actually survive the current moment, to get through it, I'm thinking about what we can do to kind of battle the helplessness and the hopelessness that can come from thinking about large-scale inequities that anthropologists are so good at revealing. And so I'm trying to restructure the class to really think about, okay, we are seeing this issue. What are some of the things that could be done about this, that we could advocate for to be done to address some of these issues, hoping that it gives students a sense of kind of empowerment to seeing themselves as part of the solutions and to some of the issues that are happening now, but also will happen as we move forward. In this sense, as we started with, that this is going to be really a paradigm shifting experience. Mm-hmm. Some other smaller things are thinking about when you're developing assignments. I think the challenges that Mike is pointing out and that he's developed are a really good example of how you can think beyond research papers and exams, which tend to be the two, I think, most used kind of assignments. But can students be producing op-eds, for example, or making a video as a final product, or a podcast, or graphic narratives in medical anthropology? I've had students recently making graphic illness narratives. Can they do creative art or use web resources? There's a link in here to a discussion of what an unessay might look like in anthropology. The link is not working right this second. So it's through Teaching and Learning Anthropology, which got hacked yesterday. So we are working on getting that back up, but I left the link there because it will come up again. We also have also using multiple low stakes forms of assessment instead of a couple of big ones. So even if your regular class runs on, 2 exams and a research paper, having these really large major assessments is going to be especially challenging for students right now. So having multiple lower stakes things, multiple quizzes that they can take, short reflections, little discussion posts, joining a small group discussion, perhaps live if that works for your class, having journal assignments, scaffolded assignments where you take maybe a bigger project and really break it down into smaller steps that are much more manageable for students when they're overwhelmed with a number of things that are happening.
Mm-hmm.
And then you could also consider even giving students a choice in things. So this is this idea of the kind of choose your own adventure class, where here are some assignments, you can pick 3 of them to do whatever it is that works with your current life situation, with where you're living, with the amount of internet access you have. Perhaps students could participate in an asynchronous discussion on the discussion board online, or they could come to a live discussion. They can choose whichever one works for them. They could write a book review about something, or they could give a presentation to students. Some of that depends again on the size of classes and what exactly you're teaching. But thinking about if there are kind of multiple options that you can give students so that they can figure out what works best for them right now.
Yeah, that's great. And as we move into assessment and thinking about how we're going to assess these things, I wanted to mention a couple things. You mentioned like really small assignments that are scaffolded and build to something bigger. I would just recommend and encourage you to think about maybe some of those don't actually have to be graded, or they just have to be graded as sort of done, not done, because you're going to be so busy. You're going to have to sort of think about your time. And one way to save a lot of time is to have done, not done assignments, essentially, and put trust in your students. And also maybe try to build assignments that are inherently interesting and fun. So students are going to try hard on them and do their best on them. And you don't really have to grade them carefully. That's kind of one of the things we think about when we do our challenges in Anth 101. And I'll just give you an example here of what this looks like. We actually have students use hashtag Anth 101, and there's about maybe 50 classes around the world using it. And you can actually just go here and you can see, students posting different things from their challenges. And a lot of them are just sort of inherently interesting to the students. So I think that's why they do them and why they like to do them. There's also a sort of social piece here. Here we're using Instagram. By using Instagram, it goes somewhat public. They can adjust how public it is, and we even have a non-public option for them as well, where they just use Canvas. But it does create some encouragement for them and sort of the social, and also a sense of presence and connection to their classmates. So we've really had a lot of luck with that, and these sort of like low-level, very sort of easy assignments, but engaging assignments as well. And that, I think, leads us into kind of how we want to assess in ways that build community and a sense of being together. One thing that I like to do is actually just use video for feedback. So especially in online classes, if they're doing a big project, I like to get on the video one-on-one with the student and just talk to them about the project, rather than sending them this sort of faceless text response to their project. I like to talk to them about what I see is working, what's not working, and so on. And then if you have a big group, if you have a large class, you can do group feedback by video as well, which also is a great way to increase your presence. And Angela, you had some thoughts on alternative grading as well.
Yeah, I think one thing that you mentioned, considering whether everything has to be graded, the answer is no. It doesn't all have to be graded by you. Using pass, no pass grading systems, credit or no credit. I saw somebody was commenting in the chat. A number of institutions are trying to move to just blanket pass, no pass for all courses coming up. I think that's a great idea if your institution is, or you can advocate for that. But other approaches include things like contract grading. There's a link in there. This is something that I've seen most often in the humanities and especially composition classes. But if you are teaching kind of small writing intensive classes, this can be great to consider. You can also have students complete a self-assessment. So there's a link to an article in the Chronicle of Higher Ed. So it's behind a paywall, but if you have campus or VPN access, this shares an ungrading approach that the anthropologist Susan Blum has developed. And she shares in there, I could try to find the PDF too, so we can post that as a resource for those who don't have access behind the paywall there. But she shares an example from, I think, a food anthropology class, in which she has at the end of the class, students do a self-reflection and self-analysis of how their learning has developed throughout the class, and then propose a grade for themselves. And she's had great success with that.
Yeah. I really enjoy the sort of ungrading approach, or the not yet grading, as I think of it. As I throughout the semester, I just don't give, sometimes I don't give any grades, and I just give feedback. And then, we're building something together. And I have an image of this that I used, and I actually share this with my students, like assignment 1 gets you to this level, assignment 2, this level, and so on. And we're building towards something that's really worth it, like that you're going to really care about. And one of the nice things is when students get that not yet grade, I actually try to create community at that moment as well by saying, hey, let's get everybody up to that first platform. And so let's all help each other understand the concepts and ideas, and that creates a sense of helping one another, and a sense that we're all in this together, and so on. So I really value that kind of grading as well.
This is something you have to explain to students. When I started experimenting with this, they are very concerned about it.
They are, absolutely.
At first.
Yeah.
And so this is something where also it's really good to try to help students understand what this will mean for them, what exactly grading will look like. But really, releasing the kind of pressure on the numbers of points that people are getting, and on the letter grades themselves, and focusing it more on what your overall goals are, and reassuring students that it will be fine in the end. Can help to adjust. I mean, some of these things are helpful in our kind of regular teaching practices too, but especially right now.
Yeah, and I think your comment also speaks to a note about being careful with these things, because you can create anxiety by not providing any grades at all, right? And people feel like they're swimming and wondering, like, how am I actually doing? Am I actually going to be in line to get that A that I need? So be careful with this method, and it works if you have a strong connection with your students and they can trust you and all those types of things, and you trust them. It's trickier, I think, in larger classes. It can be tricky, so, but it's definitely a good idea. So the last thing we want to talk about, and then we'll open up to some questions, is just self-care for yourself. One of the nice things that AQ provides is this guide to establishing expectations for your teaching presence. Basically, make sure your students know that you're not going to be online at certain hours, and creating a time, like a really clear time that you will be very responsive. I tell my students that I have office hours from this time to this time, and I also tell them I'm going to go to 0 inbox at that time. And they won't necessarily hear from me the other 23 hours of the day, but during that hour, they can trust that they will get a response by noon that day, because my office hours are typically 11 a.m. to noon. And I make sure I go to 0 inbox at that point. That's my own personal way of making sure I get back to them within 24 hours, but also putting limits on myself. I only check email at certain hours. They know I'm not going to see anything that goes after 6 p.m., things like that. So just put those types of things out there. Angela, you had a comment on this as well.
I think, along those lines too, I think part of the communication and building community in the class is both recognizing that your students are human beings with really complicated lives, but also helping them recognize that you are a human being who is also working with, I have a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old here. Like we need to adjust our expectations because this is how the work is happening, that we all are kind of dealing with many of these situations, and we're all doing our best. Recognizing that everybody is doing their best here, and we're going to work together to get through this. And so also kind of making that apparent, that you are also a person doing your best in a really complicated situation. One of the resources linked in the document is a link to a 6 faculty guest lecture exchange spreadsheet. So also remembering that you're not alone in this. This is a spreadsheet where you can go, it's an open document started by Bonnie Kaiser at UCSD. And you can go and sign up for, here are the classes that I already had lectures prepped on. I could, with almost no notice, just jump on Zoom and give somebody a lecture on this issue. And so this is an opportunity for people to both share their availability, but also if you just need somebody to come on and give a lecture about this issue, you can call on others too, that there are increasingly these efforts and other suggestions for other efforts that would help people, I think, are really welcomed too, for ways that we can share resources and support each other as we're all shifting online.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing resource that's being created there, and it's beautiful actually to see all the people putting themselves out there to help each other. It's really great. So the last thing we wanted to say is that less is more in this situation. Creating a simple structure and maybe underestimating in a way like how much material you put out there might actually create more space for reflection, contemplation, and spontaneous depth. It'll create space to talk about the things that are inevitably going to come up over the next weeks or months. So you don't necessarily have to build up all your materials now. Create that nice simple structure with a lot of breathing room so that you can adjust to what comes next.
And we've given a lot of resources here, but this isn't to recommend that you use all of these resources. Yeah. It's really a toolkit. We're teaching very different classes, different size classes. Some of us are changing midstream. Some of us are developing brand new classes. So this is a collection of various suggestions that may work in a variety of types of classes. We're really thinking about what would work for the particular classes, the particular students you're working with, and really seeing this as a toolkit of options to consider.
Yeah, and I think maybe to wrap back to the beginning is maybe think of your own sort of mantra, your own core, like why. Why do you teach? What do you want your students to get out of this? How do you want them to change? And give yourself like 5 words for that you can remind yourself and just stick to that, and build around that as you go. Okay, so I think maybe we're open to questions. How much is this officially going to go for 29 more minutes? Is that how it works?
Yes, it is. We are keeping it open for as long as we need to. I do want to thank everyone for, I'll tell you what, as soon as the questions were popping up in the chat room, not only were you all answering, but our audience was providing a lot of wonderful resources and knowledge to it. So I appreciate it. It is kind of funny. I've seen a number of responses that we're all in this together. And that was just a perfect example of it. Let me ask one quick question. I saw it further up there, and that had to do with, are there any security issues with all of this? Someone actually wrote, what about security? If you create lectures, are these platforms ready to block sharing?
So I think it depends on which platform you're using, and then and I think there's moments where you want to sort of feel like you're in a safe space, like a sort of special space with your students, and you don't want it to go out. I can only speak for my technological space, right? So for us, I think if we want to be very private, we use our sort of home-based video server, which is MediaSite, and a lot of universities use MediaSite. And then if I'm a little bit more loose with it, I'll make an unlisted YouTube video. And then if I think I've got something here that I think everybody might be interested in, I will make a public video on YouTube. So that's how I go about producing my own lectures, but I don't know if anybody has other thoughts.
I think we have, so using if your institution has a course management system, like you use Blackboard or Canvas or Moodle or one of those, there's a number of them. Usually those are designed to really restrict access to some of the materials. And there are particular settings you can use to restrict that access. For video hosting, my campus uses Yuja, which integrates then with Canvas, and that's what we've been recommended, to put videos there as opposed to putting them on YouTube. Keep in mind too that there are access issues from other institutions. I think, okay, I just see somebody posting it. So at UC Irvine, we have a lot of students in China who cannot access YouTube or Google products because of the IT restrictions, the internet restrictions there. So thinking about who your student population is too. So we have campus resources that were specifically designed for online classes for students who are taking those classes from nations where they can't access some of the other public areas.
Yeah, and you can always duplicate content. So you can go with the surefire thing, it's going to work for your students, which would be anything inside your course management system. And then if you want to publish to a broader audience, then YouTube would be a way to go.
I am very hesitant about encouraging students to use social media and incorporating unrestricted social media in classes, especially I have in the past used like Facebook or Twitter, but I've really stopped doing that. Those can be really, unless you can create very limited access places. Social media can be very hostile for a lot of people, especially people of color, especially people from marginalized backgrounds. And so thinking about if you're having students engage with some of these broader sites, thinking about the real risks that they might face in those places is also really important.
Yeah. We've had a lot of discussions about that with the Anth 101 and how we use Instagram, and we've mostly sort of kept it's not super secure and safe, obviously, but we've yet to have a problem in 4 or 5 years now, I think, by using essentially hashtags. And the hashtags basically they don't limit anything, because people could, I suppose, search and find these things, but they're really like crazy hashtags. Like I've put one in there, Val's Pals 1030. And we talk to students about those risks and let them weigh those. And we don't require them to be on the social media by any means because of the risk, but we leave it open. And a lot of students choose to do it because they find it fun and interesting to do it that way.
One of the things we've done in a course that I was one of the co-creators on regarding social media posts was asking students, if you don't want to keep it on there, screenshot it and delete it. Screenshot it, share it to us, delete it. And that's going to also count if that is a concern for you about safety.
Okay. I'm trying to look. I don't see any other questions. Again, I do want to thank everyone for taking the time today to join us and for actually helping us with the entire conversation, which was a big help. Also, I want to remind everyone that this discussion is far from over. Believe me, we will have, well, first of all, I want to point out that we do have a continuing discussion on the AAA communities. If you would, you can go to our website, and across the top, you'll see communities listed up there. You can click on that, drag down, and then you'll have to sign in, I believe, and then you click on My Communities. You'll see a pull-down bar that looks for My Communities, and it'll be listed there under COVID-19 Responsive Teaching and Learning Part 1. And that also gives me an opportunity to once again pitch for, we're going to continue this conversation next Tuesday, March 24th, and with another webinar at 1 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. And also backtracking, this Thursday, remind people that we're going to have a webinar on fear, stigma, and steps forward, again, at 1 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. The recording for this, and as well as the chat, the chat stream will be posted. We're going to post in a number of areas, but I would look on the AAA website that has, we have a webinar page, so look for it there. We'll also, I think we can post it in our communities, AAA communities. And then lastly, I think we'll also have a YouTube posting as well. But I would look for it in communities and on our webpage first. We'll get that up. I think that's it. I want to thank our presenters. Wonderful job. We covered a lot, and you know, judging by the chats, I think we hit a lot of the targets that they were. We answered a lot of the questions they had. So thank you all, and hopefully we will see and hear you, or at least read you on the chat room at our next webinars. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
I think that might be it. I think everyone is off at this point.
Yeah, great.
Thanks, Rob. Question. Okay, so you know what? I was going to send an email out, but great job. I thought it went really well. Everyone worked. It was very conversational. And again, the chat room was just fantastic. People loved it. So I was going to send an email. The most important thing is, Mike, can you send me how I can get that beach background?